We ready? Go ahead and call the meeting to order. This is the second FY 2018-2019 Budget Development Workshop.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At this time, this budget workshop, we're going to review the where we're at on 17-18 and the 5-year forecast for those, and I'll turn it over to Brandy.
Go to the first slide. All right, starting with our general fund, we're looking at about a $260,000 increase in revenue. This is just general administration revenue, not including our departments like planning and zoning, EMS, animal services that collect revenue. So that's going to be specifically a combination of your public service tax, your communication service tax, any state revenue sharing, state half-cent sales tax, the fiscally constrained legislative offset we get, and any investment interest that's not overflowed to our revenue stabilization fund. So to give you a little perspective on that revenue, it's close to $8.5 million total, and we're excluding property taxes right now. We're not talking about ad valorem. And of that, the largest portion is going to be your state sales tax, and your PST is another large portion. Our PST is currently at 7%, and that gives us about $1.4 million a year in revenue. So each percentage is roughly about $200,000. And as the users increase with PST, you know, we have the new construction going, so all those people are now getting utility services. That will start to increase a little bit. So as users increase, that percentage, what it's worth, starts to increase a little bit as well. Looked like you had something to say. Okay, go ahead.
One of the things also that's occurring is the CST, the Communication Services Tax. Okay. Well, I just wanted to make sure we reiterate this. It's continuing to drop due to the use of the pay-as-you-go cell phones. That is dropping, and in the future we're going to, not this year, but we need to work on that source of revenue. Because what it decreases, it wipes away the increase in PST, and there is no. So what we need to do is, in reality, swap out the CST or move the CST into the PST if we can, or some combination thereof.
That's right where I was going. In contrast to our PST going up, we get. In 14-15, we collected about $800,000 in CST. Now we're down to about $760,000. So when you combine the budgeted revenue of the PST and CST together, you actually have a loss of about $15,000. So that was, as David was saying, we can consider repealing the CST or going to a different percentage, but that our PST has a max cap of 10%. We're currently at 7%. So you don't have quite enough room with your PST to recover all of your CST revenue. So it's something that we need to look at. And just so you know, that CST is determined by the address. That address has to originate in the state or terminate in the state. And when you use the pay-as-you-go program, those dealers are not collecting that information. It's just a simple transaction where that information isn't included. And that's really what's happening. I think the internet, the video, the communications, all that stuff, people are still using those, but that no contract phone service is pretty appealing, so a lot of people are going that way. Go to the next.
You say the CST is 760,000?
Yes. That's what the budget's that's what our current estimate is for 18-19. So shifting on to ad valorem, which is the other large portion of our general administration revenue, and somewhere around in the current year is about $8.5 million. We're going to see about $210,000 in growth, and that's based on anywhere between $28 million and $31 million in new taxable value, which is going to come from your new construction, additions, any rehabilitative improvements that increase the assessed value by 100%, and tangible personal property over 100% 115% over the previous year. So when you look at that, where we're at right now is a quarter mil gets you somewhere between $280,000 and $300,000 in terms of ad valorem. So we're talking about one factor being growth and one factor being what our millage rate equates to. Just so you know, the estimated rollback rate that we're looking at right now, and Brad has not certified, or the property appraiser has not certified the taxable values. That'll come at the end of this month. So we're working on estimates right now. We'll get these nailed down to very specific 4 decimal place numbers, but right now it's roughly 7.5, and our current millage rate is roughly 8. So when we talk about that $260,000 in general admin increases from your PST and your state revenue sharing, and then your $210,000 in your growth, you're looking at about $470,000 to allocate across the BOCC departments and all the constitutional officers. Let's see, we talked about, we did look at our departmental revenue, and there are some places that are going to see an increase. EMS revenue is really your main large revenue. We're estimating about $100,000 budget number over the current year, but those costs in EMS are also rising as well, so that revenue increase is going to offset a lot of those departmental expenses. Those employees, the majority of them are special risk in the FRS, and so the employer portion that we pay is almost a quarter of their salary a year, and that went up about 3% for 18-19 over the current year. So when you're thinking about as many of those employees, that's a pretty big hit. We've got a couple other, P&Z is pretty steady. We got a little aggressive in 17-18 with our revenue number, and Summer's going to hit it. But I understand from talking to her that things are starting to kind of settle, so we're not gonna be aggressive next year. We're gonna stay pretty static. Animal services, we've got some good numbers on our adoptions now that we've had a whole year. But when you increase those adoptions, you also increase the expenses of getting those animals ready and treated and vaccinated and all that stuff to be adopted. So you're getting a little over here, but you're spending a little more over here.
6% margin.
So
we made about 16 and costing about 8.
Our probation department, we're looking at a loss there from the current year as far as what our budget number is going to be of about $7,000 to $8,000. So that kind of takes away some of your increases, your small increases in your smaller departments. And community center, we might see a little uptick. We're budgeting. We've got the Rivertown Community Church in there. They came in January, so we did not have a full year of them being there. So we're going to see, they pay about $4,000 a month. We're going to see at least that additional $12,000 in the community center once they're in there for an entire year. But the bulk of what we have to spread around is this $470,000 at the rollback rate and that includes all the constitutional officers and the BOCC departments.
And also one of the things with EMS is not only fire and EMS, is not only the FRS, but also as we're seeing is drugs. We're having a continually increased drug availability is a problem, and then also the cost of those drugs are going up, and we're having to realign how we purchase. So those costs continue to increase as well. So the more revenue we get, that means we've, in theory, pushed more medicines, meds, etc. So those costs will go up that way.
Okay, next one. Now, we have some of our mandated increases in the general fund that there's just absolutely nothing we can do about. Medicaid and HICRA are 2 of those. That's about $30,000. It may be a little less, but the state's on July 1 to June 30th, so we always have that unexpected quarter at the end of the year where we don't know exactly what our share is going to be at this time. So we have a little contingency in there just to make sure we can cover it. And then FRS in the general fund is going to be about $115,000. And the Medicaid is a general administration expense. The FRS is spread out through the general fund specific to each department. So your employees in county administration department, their FRS is charged to county administration and so on. Go to,
This is just general fund.
this is just general fund we're talking about first. Go to the next one. Doesn't help me. Now these are just our operational increases that we could choose to fund or not choose to fund. Our CHP, and this includes all of our BOCC departments and all constitutional officers at an 8%, or this is a 6.5% increase over current year, is $260,000. Could be a little less, could be a little more. It's kind of early in the game to know. We usually start to get that about the 1st of August. Hopefully a little bit before. Maybe a little bit before.
Does that include the 100 that we're giving the sheriff for his 3 additional
No,
people?
we're not there yet.
No, we're not there yet.
And then our workers' compensation, this number does include the sheriff because he's got some of those high-risk employees like we do with the public safety employees. And so combined, we're looking at about a $100,000 increase in workers' compensation. That's not something we can take it or leave it. We kind of have to do that, but it's not mandated on us by the state like the Medicaid and the FRS are. And so the other operational increase we're looking at is we have 3 flex positions that are fire EMTs or paramedic EMTs. It's one position because they work, and I might need Louis to help me this. Those guys work 48 hours on and 96 off. So there's a flex employee that does not receive FRS benefits and they do not receive health insurance already in this position. What we intend to do is convert that over to a full-time employee rather than a flex staff. So you're going to have an increase in the benefits, the FRS, and have to offer them health insurance. The problem, as I understand it, is these flex guys don't really have a lot of reason to be committed to make sure they're there for their shift, and when it's not full, they're not able to send a ambulance or a fire truck or something. They're having to, they're not having a truck available. You want to explain that a little more gracefully than I did?
You did pretty good.
Oh, thanks.
No, yeah, it's one position per shift, so it's 3 positions. The guys work 48, 96s. One of the challenges we're having is, Debbie can speak to this, is these guys, like Randy said, they're not super reliable. So if they get offered full-time at their other job and they're going to make $800 to work that overtime shift, they're going to go work that, and they're going to call out here. So it puts us in a bind. Unfortunately, my guys, unlike office people, I can't not have them there. That spot has to be filled, so we're getting stuck mandating overtime on people, which is never nice when somebody's already worked 48 hours. It's a risk. 72 hours working. The other issue is the health insurance. We've had 3 or 4 now that have worked enough hours that we're having to offer them health care anyways. So that was our decision. That's why we brought this to them and tried to push this through.
And that said, these positions, they are split. A portion of them does go to the MSBU fund. So this whole entire $50,000 won't fall on the general fund, but for purposes of what we're talking about here, I think we're in the ballpark.
And since we've made the moves that we've made in the past couple of years with bringing in the 3rd shift and focusing on overtime, we have dropped our overtime considerably.
Yeah.
So, and we're also this year, for the first time, this coming up year, we're breaking the overtime up in the budget and we're tracking it now, the mandated overtime versus the other overtime, meaning somebody didn't show up and somebody had to work overtime. So we're tracking that as well.
Yeah, the biggest risk here is having to down a unit. I think the dollars and stuff, when you look at it, it's not a huge increase because we offer a pay differential to flex employees, so they actually make $2 more an hour than our full-time employees because they don't get benefits. But when they start getting benefits and you're giving them $2 an hour, the money difference just isn't there. But like I said, the biggest risk is having to down units. We already run a bare bones every day. And when you start talking about sometimes having to literally shut a unit down because we just don't have a soul that can work it.
All right. Thank you, Louis. All right, so between our combination of our mandated increases and our operational increases, we're looking at about $505,000 in increases. and flash back for a second and realize that we just talked about having $470,000 worth of new general administration revenue. So as far as an $8.4 million budget, which is what the operating of the BOCC is, no constitutionals included, in the general fund, that $35,000 gap there is within tolerance, and we would most likely be okay where we wouldn't need to bring cash if that was the case, because we're never going to spend our whole entire budget. And then we also have these new services that we're bringing on a full-time employee in our public safety department. That's really additional services that we're providing to citizens because we're staffing up to be able to make sure we don't have that truck down. So we wanted to know exactly now we know what our mandated and operational increases are that we really think are necessary. We went and looked at things that are more on the want category, and that would be your COLA for your employees. So we identified what the 1% cost would be and what a 2% cost would be for all of the BOCC and the constitutional officers. And the thing that's important about the COLA to me is that you're looking at now, next year, 1920, your expenses were at this level, but now you've raised them. So those recurring costs continue to grow with that COLA each year. So now you have to collect more revenue just to cover your regular standard costs. And that's the way I look at it, is down the road, what's this going to do, because it increases our costs. And I don't know if you want me to go through what each of those numbers are, but you can see that's roughly what it costs for each of the constitutional officers, just the COLA effect. When you look at where we are in the current year and where we ended last year, my estimate is that our decrease in fund balance at the end of this year is going to be about $225,000. We budgeted to spend $467,000, and after our year ended last year, we realized we didn't want to do that because we burned through a little more cash last year than was the intent, and part of that was the EMS effect, or the EMS write-off effect. We had a settlement in there that was unanticipated, so we really felt like next year, 18-19, we want to use that as a recovery year. And I don't want recovery year to be a scary thing. It's not the end of the world if we dip down $250,000 below what our fund balance is. But I do think it's important. David and I thought that we really need to take a year to let everything shake out and settle back in, because as your expenses go up, your fund balance target also goes up. And what we don't want to have is that hole and that gap between what we actually have in fund balance and what our target is. We don't want to have that hole get any bigger. So that was the recommendation that we have. That said, we do have some employees in the BOCC, and I'm assuming the other constitutionals as well, that are making wages that are really hard to live on. So there may be some one-time adjustments, just bringing people up to a living wage. I think that's important, that all of our county employees be able to survive on what they bring home. And I'm sure the other constitutional officers probably have some of those cases as well. But as far as the across-the-board COLA this year, just don't think it's the right year to do it. So that was the general fund, and Sheriff Miller's at accreditation, so he won't be here, and Jan had an appointment, so I get to say anything I want about the Sheriff's Fund today, which is fun. We all know that Jared has requested some additional law enforcement staff. That cost is roughly $300,000 to bring on those 5 employees. His fuel increase for the year, and this is not just from the 5 additional employees, this is the new employees with vehicles plus the rising cost of fuel, so that's spread out. He's also got some corrections expenses that are kind of forced on him because of the ICE program, and that is the inmate medical contract and then the inmate meals. Just so you know where we are, we're budgeting $1.8 million in jail bed revenue, and the cost is about $1.5. So that hole is getting smaller. We're getting to where we're closing up that gap as well.
This makes it 1.5.
The,
All
yes,
right, this would make
that's
it
what the
1.5,
cost,
so our risk becomes $300,000.
a little less than that, but
So a little less, just a little less.
we like
than
to,
300,000.
we're rounding.
A whole lot better than what we were 4 or 5 years ago.
And, and to give you some perspective on how costly this ICE program is, because of the federal requirements, which are different than our local requirements, the total increase Jared's asked for, Sheriff Miller has asked for in the corrections is $251,000. Of those costs, $183,000 are specifically related to the ICE program, and the other $68,000 is for local. So you can see it's definitely not a even playing field there. We do project that the sheriff's office will be at fund balance or real close at the end of this year. So we've actually talked to the sheriff about budgeting a contingency for them to purchase their own vehicles out of some of that fund balance, since we know we're going to collect the $3 million in jail bed revenue this year, or potentially they have some improvements they need to make to their maintenance building as well as their work camp building, potentially funding some of those capital projects themselves through the fund balance. And since it's a one-time, not recurring, it's fine, that's appropriate use of it. And there is some corrections fees, impact fees that we have residual that we could kind of help match with that, with if they wanted to do some improvements there.
And internally, we have worked with the sheriff's department to make sure that the temptation's not there for any of us to say, let's use any of this money for operational increases. These are all one-time expenditures, so we're holding serve of that.
Go. So that puts us in the situation of needing about $430,000 through property taxes to fund those additional services in the sheriff's office. Now, remember we said that a quarter mil gets us $280,000 to $300,000, so somewhere around 0.45, 0.5 mil, we're talking rough numbers here still, to fund those additional public safety staff. And that puts the proposed millage very close to where we are now, which is about 8.0351, or 8, very close to where we are right now.
Hey, clarify that. So the figures you're giving us so far is if we go to the rollback rate?
We need about $430,000, or roughly $500,000 more than the rollback rate to fund those additional law enforcement officers.
I thought you were going,
Or
we need $500,000 above where we're at right now.
No.
No.
Well, that's a little bit better news.
Yeah, it's not what we want.
Well, and that's kind of where the discussion now kind of goes. If there's other suggestions, if you want to try something different, if there's an alternative you want us to explore as far as revenue, that's what we're here for, because right now that's the direction that we're looking. You can go to the next one.
Am I not at the next?
You're not at the next one. This is River St. Water. This is your show.
Well, are there any questions on that y'all?
Can you back up to that slide you just had?
Yes.
Help me understand.
Yeah. Well,
We're talking about the sheriff.
Oh,
Can he obligate to bring in more revenue to offset his need of 430,000?
this is his primary need here. The bulk of that is another shift of deputies, of just deputies patrolling. Where he gets his primary revenue is on the ICE side. This has nothing. This is completely separate than ICE.
But isn't he making money on the ICE program?
Yeah.
So why is this?
But we're closing the fund balance.
Yeah, we're closing the fund
Closing the
balance.
he's not making money. It costs more to operate than what we're budgeting, or it costs, yeah.
Yeah. You just got to separate the two. ICE is over here, operating what he's wanting to increase for. He's wanting to increase to to put deputies on the street. He's got 3 shifts right now, and he wants to hire a total of how many?
5.
Five more folks to that will give him in theory, a 4th shift. That means he'll have 4 deputies in the county versus 3 at any one time.
Right. It puts another deputy on at all times.
And your ICE revenue, and what we had talked about as far as the ICE revenue is concerned, we have to if all of a sudden, if there's an administration change and ICE goes away or it gets to where it's not worth it, and we witnessed that one time.
So we don't want to pledge more ICE money.
That's right. We don't want to pledge more ICE money. What we want to do is we want to get as our cost increase, and we hit a ceiling here of 1.8. As our costs grow, we want to be able to say whenever that cost, all of a sudden we can cash out,
Okay.
and we're net neutral.
So back to what you suggested a while ago, you made the comment that we can talk about different revenue source. There's only one place for it to come, and that's...
Well, you could increase your PST a percentage or two. There's different things that we can talk about. But
You can always reduce expenses.
You have to. $80,000. That's a big cut.
And really, in the general fund, your biggest asset or your biggest expense is your personnel. It's your staff. The operating that goes with it is small, but it's your staff. So you're talking $480,000, roughly 7-8 employees.
More than that.
Well, it depends on what level employees. They could start at the top.
Yeah, you're right. That'd be a big chunk, wouldn't it?
And Commissioner Hess, I just misspoke to you. It does not cost more to operate than what we were budgeting. That was backwards in my head when I said it.
The average employee, that's about 11 people.
Starting at the top.
Starting at the top, it'd be
We just
about-
lost
be
one
about
employee.
The only thing that I'd like to see, be able to try to consider is a pay raise for the lower level employees, not, I don't know where to break that.
Well, and that's what we're doing.
Below
We're
department
already
heads or-
working on that, and those numbers have been put in here, and we're
know what
working
those
on
are
that.
when you get them, so we...
Yeah, we've got some significant raises for some of these folks that are making barely a minimum, barely.
$10 an hour.
So we're looking at that, and we've already made some moves in that direction. But what this would be is the 430,000 would be. The idea is if you go to rollback and then bounce back up off of rollback, you're still going to be either at where we are today from a millage rate or just below that.
And definitely under 8.25.
And definitely under 8.25, which is our ceiling.
Established
That's right.
a few years ago.
Okay. Any other questions on that? I know there will be in the future, but.
You got any good news?
Huh?
You got any good news?
Well, we bought our share of good news. It's time to, you can't always, sometimes you gotta take a breath.
It's
And
a
the
shame
good
that
news
we're...
about this is these are operational increases. These are not, we're putting people in jobs and taking care of an issue versus just a general government increase. You know what I mean? We're adding a service. If we don't want to do this, don't want to add that forth, we don't do it. Now, let's go to, all right, we're going to change gears a second, and y'all can bounce back anytime, as I'm sure you will, and if Commissioner Merritt here, he would bounce back.
So the public knows he's at a CRTPA meeting.
CRTPA meeting, yes, and he knew he was going to be running late. We have, I think I've talked to each one of y'all. We're working with Talcon Electric right now on the potential sale of the River Sink water system. Currently, we're also in the throes of drilling a new well. DOT, as you know, they gave us land plus $665,000 for the relocation of the well. Currently, we've got a deal with Talcon. In theory, we're getting our land appraised. We have a value of our assets, so we know what they've made us an offer, and we're verifying that offer, that we can live with that offer. So hopefully that'll be coming back to you guys soon. This would be a good deal not only for the county from a revenue standpoint, but also it'd be a gain for our customers. In fact, there's Commissioner Merritt. Actually, because Talcon will be able to absorb these customers into their overall rate base, and the RiverSync customers should, according to Talcon, see a decrease in their water bills. So it should have a positive impact for the county, to us, to the tune of a pretty good little chunk of change, and then also to the RiverSync water system folks. All right.
How much does this do for the people in Spring Creek and have problems with the Talcon water and the Talcon water quality?
The only thing it will do with them is it would probably increase their pressure a little bit, because they don't have to feed all that far, because this will primarily help the northern part of the county. But it would just be a little bit of pressure if they've got everything interconnected still.
But it won't solve their water
It
problem.
will not solve Shell Point. Nope. Now, talking about Shell Point, Talcon sewer deal, as you know, we've been trying to pursue that with Talcon. We're looking at right now, the best that we can do is probably an estimated value of assets of about $500,000 with an annual revenue from hookups of about $150,000. This would cover our system and give the citizens a good payback and afford us the ability to treat the sewer and also to pay for the treatment of the sewer and pay for system increases. Now, the one thing with this deal that it would improve the water quality, decrease some of the environmental issue impacts that we're having through septic tanks in these sensitive areas, and I had to read that because you put it in here. And but anyway, the only way this deal would work, though, Talcon is asking a little more than this, but we're gonna stick to our number because it just doesn't make sense to go any higher than this, because there's not a good rationale from an asset standpoint that it would justify us giving any more money for this. But the only way this deal would work, if we were able to bring this to you, is everyone at Shell Point, Spring Creek, and Oyster Bay that has a house that are not tied to the system, they would have to tie on. Have to.
And this doesn't take, everybody that's on sewer right now, it goes to our plant anyway.
It goes to our
right?
plant anyway.
So we're not, if you're just picking up people that aren't on sewer right now,
Yeah.
then we got the collection system we got to maintain.
That's right. That's right. So we've got, so anyway, but the way this works is everybody would have to tie on, and that would be both financially and environmentally. They would have to, because if we did this, the only reason we're going after this primarily is for the environmental impact of improving the water quality down there, because we do have funding coming from Gulf Consortium Pot 3 dollars to help improve the system if we're able to purchase it. But we'd also don't want to buy a pig in a poke, because anything could happen with that money. So we want to make sure we make a good buy, and then environmentally, we've all got to do what we got to do. So that's going to be the issue with that. Now, whether Talcon will take the $500K, I can't tell you that. We've got a little bit more work to do on valuing. But I think that's about where the number is. I would not recommend going any higher than that whatsoever. In fact, I think it ought to be lower, but I can justify $500,000.
How many of these hookups have the sewer line out in front of them? Are you got to extend the line?
There is, according to, some will have to have some extensions, but the majority of them there's right at, I'd say I believe that number was probably about 130. 130 between all three subdivisions. The majority is in Spring Creek and Shell Point. Oyster Bay only has like 9 or something, 7 I
And there's
think.
no sewer on Live Oak Island either, right?
And there's no sewer in Live Oak. In order for us to do anything on Live Oak, we need to own this system as well. So, and we've got that in the Restore Act Pot 3 funding as well.
When you're talking about hookups, is it mandatory?
That's what we're saying. The only way this would work, it would be mandatory hookups.
And is that you charging them the standard hookup fee, or letting them hook on for
Currently,
free?
that would be the standard hookup fee, yes. Now, naturally, we could say, we're gonna cut that in half, we're gonna do this, we can structure those deals if we want to. Just understand every time we do that, we have a tendency to, that just, make somebody else pay for it. Unless we have other funding to pay for it, my suggestion is they pay the full boat just like other people in Wakulla are doing now that we're tying on other than
Direct
grant.
funds from somewhere else into that area that you're putting funds up Spring Creek Highway, let's say?
No, sir, the DEP, will not fund any of that. We've asked that question because there's not a direct effect to the springs.
So,
Wouldn't this be in the BMAP area that number?
It's not, but they're considered not a direct threat to the springs. We went over that with them. That's the reason they asked us to put it in Gulf Consortium.
so they don't worry
3.
about the coast, they just worry about the springs?
Yes, yes.
Well, the BMAP money is only for springs and groundwater
That's right.
protection. This is coastal protection. This is, if you're concerned about our oysters, you're concerned about our fishing industry. That's why we need to be cleaning up the coastal.
Well, that's what I'm asking the question, is
Yeah.
which is more important, Spring Creek Highway or correcting the Shell?
Problem is, they're probably gonna tell you both.
So, I'm looking here for a copy of that BMAP, the PFA 1 and 2. Is this actually in number 2? Because I hear what they're saying, what they're telling you, that's not a direct contributor, but if it's in the area, as soon as this rule goes into place, they're going to require these people that own these septic tanks to upgrade them anyway. And so I was at a meeting with DEP this morning, and they committed that they're going to help offset the cost of that just in Wakulla County. But the deputy secretary also said they're going to look at whatever the most affordable way is. If we can show that it's more affordable to connect than to pay for each of these folks to go into a performance-based system, then we should be able to make that math work, assuming it's in that area.
Sure. Let me see if I can find it. I got it here somewhere.
Because then they've committed, but we would be saving them money
Mhm.
and have a better solution for us as well.
The access fee is $38.50, and I don't think you can touch a performance-based septic
No.
system close to that.
But if they have a perfectly good working septic tank, too.
Well, but also, realize this, we need to be careful there, because what we want to do is be able to say, go to the state and say, hey, give us their connection fee, but we want to tie them on, because to make this performer work, we need the monthly charges as well. If you don't, you got to have both. You got to have your connections and you got to have your
And
monthly
when we're
fees.
talking sewer collection, I'd almost say if they
Not
want to
in
give
that
it to us,
area.
we'll take it.
Hmm?
It's not.
It's not a money.
Not in there. You mean if Talcott
It's not in the area?
give us the system?
Okay.
That's what
Give
they
us the
say.
wastewater collection system.
Naturally, I
Yeah.
cannot find
I know
anything.
that V.
I didn't think it did. I thought it just went down to Spring, right before Spring Creek.
I mean, if they were smart, they would just give it to us, but they're not.
No.
Did y'all hear that? That's not in the BMAP area, so that's not going to be in one where they require them to.
But it is in the area that causes beach closure at Shell Point. So, I mean, there is
It
some
does- is this-
validity to it.
Yeah, it
But
does environmentally.
at what point do you spend a lot of money, you know?
And that's what I mean, and this is where we are. They wanted $1.6 million for it. I said, absolutely no way. Not even close. And,
I don't know how we'd ever recover $500,000.
$500,000, we can recover $500,000, but we have to get everybody tied on. If we're not willing to do that, let's walk away.
Why hasn't Talcott required? I mean, the state law says you got to hook up if there's sewer available.
They don't have the backbone to do it. They won't. They never have.
That's
They have no
simply it.
reason to.
I mean, you know, the
Their re-
downside to this is
Their
you're going to,
return cannot be a very good return on a 1/6 valuation.
Well, and their depreciation is based upon assets that were given to them.
We've
A
done
small segment was what they paid for recently, but the assets were given to them like any utility. Developer builds it and gives it over to the utility or the municipality.
We went down this road before where it's ugly. When you
Yeah,
start telling
but
people they got
this
it
is,
wrong.
it's both environmentally and financially, and, we don't see how it works, and they may balk at the 500,000, but unless you guys want it, I'll do whatever y'all say, but I wouldn't go over that $500,000 mark for
what
nothing.
revenue are we making off their bulk I mean, we charge them, because we also have to factor in, we probably give them a discounted rate at Jerry's lift station, right?
Yeah, oh, that is a sweetheart deal. Whoever negotiated that with the county, good God.
Well, that would
It
go
was
away.
a
is what
terrible
I'm saying.
deal, yes. That was a terrible, terrible deal for the county.
If we took over the collection system, that deal goes away, because
Yeah.
well, now we no longer have a deal with Talcott. We'll be collecting the
We,
normal rates.
Let's see, Talcott Sewer,
Collected about $24,000 a year.
about 24,000 a year,
So
at
What
about
if
30,000
you
gallons of
factor
flow a
in
day.
the extra revenue that we would get over that,
Mhm.
you know, because we get, of course,
$24,000 a day doesn't pay for, $24,000 a year doesn't even pay for the treatment.
right.
Well, I think what Randy's point is it'd be neat to know what the difference would be in if we just took over that collection.
Did you already factor that in?
Yeah, I already factored that in.
Increases
We're at, hold on just a second, I'll show you, I'll tell you.
Plus the connection fees, you're saying.
Right. Yeah, just in, let's see. We would get a profit and loss, I'll add the first 5 years together. First 5 years, we'd bring in about $285,000 over expenses. That's also accruing the purchase, through that, 22-year purchase. That's what everybody hooking on. Well, and the hook-ons would be separate from that, but that's assuming everybody hooks on because that's our monthly nut. That's how we pay for everything.
The only upside to this is environmental benefit. There's no development going to happen in that area. There's no more land. So the only upside, and that maybe that is enough upside. I don't know.
Yeah, and I
I don't think it is to me.
I think it is. It is, but at what price is that? And you don't want to get
I don't know if
distorted.
there's enough upside to me to justify it.
No, you want to pay it, what is the value of the system? You don't want to overpay that.
We don't want to overpay the system, but it has it will make money for us, and we won't lose money on it, and it improves our environmental quality. So this is, why wouldn't we do this?
At a half a million, yeah.
At a $500,000.
That's the reason we're presented to y'all. I wouldn't go any over half.
Assuming everyone connects, though. What do you
Assuming
do
everybody-
with the ones that draw the line and say, nope, I'm not connected? What do you do?
State law requires connection if it's there.
What are we gonna do? Foreclose?
Code enforcement, which you have to go to. It'd get very ugly.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to have some that want to do it, and others say, well, I want somebody else to pay for it.
When they have holidays, I know that some of the homes down there, homes, apartments, or whatever, they have so many people in them that the sewer's on top of the ground. It comes out of the manhole.
Well, that's why they.
Not surprising.
Yeah.
That's the reason we have, in the Gulf Consortium, I have about $1 million in upgrades to the sewer system because of that very thing you're talking about.
I'm still struggling to figure out where all these unhooked up people are.
Well, I'll tell you.
Because
There are, this is even according to Talcott, there are 60 in Shell Point, 7 in Oyster Bay, and 59 in Spring Creek area.
those are lots or those
Houses.
I mean, there were
This is
59.
according to them, existing houses that have not hooked up.
There are 59 houses in Spring
I
Creek.
didn't even think there was 59 houses in Spring Creek, but there's a lot.
And we're surely not talking about vacant lots.
I had the property appraiser verify these numbers.
Because, I mean, the
I
Paradise Village
got the
is
map. I got the
still-
map that goes with it. Now I don't know whether they included those RV lots in that or what.
I would really like that verified. I mean, we could go to the state database. It shows
Well,
every septic
I went
tank
to the
in
property
county.
appraisers and I've got the maps. They did generate the maps with all the lots and all the houses without sewer, the addresses and all that stuff. So I can share that with you.
Seems like Gulf Consortium is the solution here. Is that-
Solution to pollution. Yeah, especially if you're going to pay anything over $500,000.
Yeah.
We can pay $500,000 out of the sewer fund and make it work. Past that, I wouldn't pay even out of the Gulf Consortium. Value, you're buying a damn sewer system, and it has a little value to start off with from an
It's probably
asset.
old.
It's old. The only thing they've got is a new pump station there where the sewer plant was, and they put in the line running all the way out to Jerry Moore Lift Station.
But all the stuff on Taft Drive, BD Taft, all that stuff's old.
Yeah, a section of, remember the developer went in and they rerouted a bunch of that? So there is a section of new, but it was the developer that paid for that, but that's a small section of
Piece in
gravity.
Spring Creek, if I remember, is it low pressure in there?
It's all low pressure, 100% low
Who
pressure.
maintains the individual grinder pumps?
I'm assuming each individual does. I doubt that
Because
Talcott
there's
does.
just one lift station, if I remember right, in
There
Spring
is.
Creek.
Mhm.
So there's not even a real collection system there, it's just a...
Yeah, there are there's 7 lift stations in the entire system. And the one lift station, there was put in 2014, and they have another one in Oyster Bay that was rehabbed in 2013. All the rest of them are much older than that.
Oyster Bay is low pressure,
Hmm.
which is inherently more problematic to maintain, by the way.
Yeah, and that's something we would look at. That's one of the areas that we would look at possibly putting, using some of the Restore Act dollars to put gravity collection in, if possible.
You don't need a decision today on that.
No, I'm just letting y'all know this is things we're working on the budget, and we may be bringing this to you. This is a good time to talk about it in these workshops. It's a good time to talk about it. It will be part of the budget if everything goes through. But you need to be
I'm
thinking
just
about
not real
that.
keen on that, the sewer thing down there.
No, I'm not either. But other than environmental, now environmentally, because there's some folks that are, you know, unintentionally, it's a problem down there, and they don't have a lot of solutions they're not willing to accept. So, okay. Next,
Did any of the constitutional officers, Cheryl?
Miss Cheryl, you want to
Can
get up and talk?
Leave her alone. Leave her alone.
Can we go back a minute? I want to make sure I understand and the public understands the total increase. We're talking about $460,000 shortfall. Okay?
Well-
Of that, how much of that was the sheriff's department's 5 deputies, 5 positions?
300,000.
Okay. I want to make sure the public understands. But
It's $300,000 for the law enforcement, and if we want to make the ICE increase, the cost for ICE to continue to close that gap, it would be another $130,000.
I strongly recommend we do.
Oh, I agree. I'm not in no way saying I'm just making sure the public understands where this money's need is, and that, I mean, I'm for helping the sheriff's department, whatever we got to do, because that's what comes with growth.
Yes.
Is anytime you see a community grow, and I think we're still the 3rd or 4th fastest growing county in the state of Florida, and we're going to continue to be, is that you're going to need more law enforcement, you're going to need more EMS and fire. That's just one of the
Well-
given evils of growth.
You look at our numbers in EMS, and just from a revenue standpoint, that is increased calls at the end of the day. Am I right, Louis?
And we understand
Increased
that.
calls, that's about 100,000, so that's,
I'm not saying that's a
Yeah.
bad thing, I'm just saying that you can call it whatever you want. At the end of the day, we got to pay for it somehow. So how do you do that? Well, you either, like Jerry suggested, you cut expenses somewhere else, or you raise revenue, and that's where the quandary is.
Now, on the other side of the equation, David, is once Jared hits fund balance, how much, or Greg, roughly how much excess revenue are they going to generate that we can spend on other things like recreation or
well, right now, they're running at a $3 million a year clip on their jail bed revenue, and they're going to end up this year about $200,000 shy fund balance, unless they
theoretically next year
theoretically they could
$3 million minus the shortfall we still have, which is what, 400,000?
It's under 300,000
Okay,
now.
so 300,000 of that 3 million we're going to have to still use for the shortfall, but theoretically the rest of that money could be used on capital improvements for parks,
Well, you still got the operational costs. though.
capital.
Capital.
3 million is just the revenue. You
That's
still
right.
got the operational costs of the program.
What's the
Yeah,
profit?
you pull out 1.8, you'd pull out the 1.8 of that,
I'll
and then
stand
that's what
corrected.
you'd
What's the
have.
profit at ICE then?
Probably 3 million minus 1.8, which is 2.2.
All right, so
1.2, I'm sorry.
All right, 1.2 minus 300,000 that's the money that could be used for capital
Right.
expenses.
Which is substantial, and that's what she's saying, move that toward vehicle
That's right,
purchase.
move that towards
We
vehicle.
talked about that before you got here.
That's right.
Or it could be used for whatever, recreation,
But
whatever.
But right now, what y'all have
Infrastructure.
proposed to us is that we're gonna have a slight tax increase.
Mm,
Yes,
Yes.
Anything above rollback rate's a tax increase.
exactly.
But
Anything above rollback is a tax increase, yes.
the
I wanna
millage
make sure
rate-
The public understands that.
Technically,
Okay.
it's, yeah.
I mean, there's not a lot of public, we're all public, because we all pay our taxes here, but most of these are employees of the county, but
But that's why, I mean, and like I say,
That's why
if we
I
do this, this adds services to the county, due to growth, et cetera, so.
I look at it as kind of a, every year there's a cost of living where stuff just costs more. If everything costs the same as it did in 1990, we'd have it made, but things just cost more. So I really think the rollback rate should have some sort of CPI built into it, because you cannot possibly, well, I guess you could provide the exact same service the next year for the exact same amount of money when everything costs more.
only if you do away with something.
Yeah, only if you cut, that's right.
Right. That's where we are.
So can we go back to that 210,000 you show, growth only?
Yes.
Does that include, appreciation and assessed values, or that's strictly new growth?
That's strictly your new growth.
Okay.
Just your new additions, everything listed there. So you'll have the increased value from existing last year. Talking with the property appraiser, we've used about a 4.5% factor, and so you'll get a little bump from that as well. But it's the most of it is going to be from your new additions.
When you say a little bump from that, how much, what's that little bump?
Well, hold on, let me see. I got my little picture.
Well, if you said 4.5%, so if we hold the millage flat, then they're looking at roughly a 4.5% increase on their individual property taxes, if we don't increase anything.
Yes. So that was last
What each
year.
homeowner would see.
Mhm.
Well, you still have the Save Our Homes cap.
Save Our Homes can hold it at 3%. So it wouldn't go up that much. It'd be,
A business could go up.
A business could go
but
up on a
Not a homestead.
Yeah, and this includes tangible and everything. So it is
tangible
everything
and
rolled
everything.
in together.
An increase in,
That actually would be 3, like Chuck pointed out.
That'd be
because of the cap.
3%, that's right.
Yeah, it'd be 4.5
But
without
still-
that cap.
Still an increase.
Yeah.
Still an increase.
Yes.
Well, and also on the ballot this year is going to be the additional homestead exemption, which, the numbers that I ran show that about 60% of the population is not going to receive a discount from that at all. But assuming that it passes, that is going to lower some taxes for that other 40%.
Yeah, no doubt.
And generally, because we're fiscally constrained, we get held harmless from that, and then it's included in our legislative offset that we receive.
Right.
Now, that could
if they keep
change
funding.
at some point too, so if they keep funding it.
Well, I'll tell you, there's a big attack, I shouldn't say attack, but there's a little fight brewing between the non-fiscally constrained counties,
I'm sure.
because they're starting to say, hey, we're going to lose $5-6 million, and the state is going to pay you guys. And so we've tried to get ahead of that. Last year, I went and spoke on their behalf at the legislature, even though we were carved out. And then some folks were saying, hey, sit down, you're carved out, I'm like, no, we're fighting for the group. And the only reason I was doing that is fighting for the entire group. So hopefully I can get the group not to fight against us and turn the legislature on us to pull that away from the fiscally constrained.
Well, like we've said before, I've said and others, is the further we can get away from relying on ad valorem, the better it is, because they're attacking it, and they're going to eventually get it down to nothing. So the further we get away and diversify our revenues, the better our taxpayers are going to be.
The estimated increase in existing value is about 23 million. So you got 28 million from growth and 23 from
23
existing.
so what does that translate to new taxes?
28 from growth, 23
I'm sorry, go ahead and answer that question.
28.
I have to run through my rollback my rate calculation, and that takes a minute.
Hurry up.
I'm working on
Did
it.
y'all discuss the PST and CS?
hour.
Yes, we did discuss the PST and CST.
I was about to ask that question. I'm just curious. I'm not at all about to propose this, but what would 3% produce of increased PSD?
About $600,000. $600 to $650,000.
So I'm showing about 184,000 increase for existing based on the numbers that you.
Yes.
Did y'all talk about getting rid of the CST?
Yeah, we've talked about that earlier, yeah, it needs to.
So what that means, if we hold the millage rate the same, then these folks are gonna pay $184,000 more because their values increased, which, there's a lot of people that are, you know,
You mean homeowners?
homeowners.
Yes.
Homeowners,
Okay.
yeah. You're gonna have the 3% cap, which is gonna protect some people. You're gonna have, some people are below the threshold of having to pay the taxes. And then you're also gonna have potentially another $25,000 offset. And so I think when all that dust settles, new money and old money coming in, I think people are gonna be fairly flat for the most part. I mean, I don't know if there's some way we can dig into that and slice it a little further, but
But do we generate the 400 and whatever thousand we need?
if we stay at the current rate instead of going to the rollback,
Still a tax increase.
it is.
Yes.
Well,
It's not a millage increase.
but all in, we're talking about a $184,000 tax increase on existing properties.
I'm with you.
And if you've already, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but if you've already reached your Save Our Homes cap, if you've got a big differential between the value of your house and the Save Our Homes value you're paying on, you're gonna rise 3% a year anyway, right? Just to trying to catch up with it.
I hate to even suggest that we might ever use that public service tax increase, because I think you may need that in years to come, where we start really hurting in ad valorem.
Well, they're gonna take ad valorem away, that's coming.
I'm just saying, that's the only other
How can you say that?
tax you have.
Look at it, you just look at the history. What have they chipped away at?
They're not taking it off the school side, though, is what's
But
interesting.
I'm telling you, they are chipping away every chance to get. Why we would want, that's the reason we need to diversify our revenues everywhere we can.
Well, it's appealing. Tallahassee can say, we cut your taxes, but they didn't have to sharpen their pencil or cut any expenses. They're cutting our taxes that we've got to figure out how to deal with their cut.
That's right.
One of the other options that we have would be an MSTU. The ad valorem collects about the same amount of money that we transfer to the sheriff's office to fund their operations each year. So
Right.
you could do an MSTU. That's potentially
Just for
They're not gonna want it.
one way you could go. I said, you missed it, that sheriff wasn't going to be here, so I could say anything I wanted to.
We could go to MSTU, do away with that.
And this has been historic.
Increase BST.
Of the 8 mills we assess, 8 mills goes to law enforcement.
Roughly, yes.
Yeah.
That's the honest to God truth.
And it's going, well, and we're.
Everything else in the county runs off other revenue
Right.
sources.
Exactly.
It's true. But that's the way it is in every county.
Well,
Yeah.
and public safety is our primary role of government,
Yeah.
you know, so.
Now, it doesn't make up all our budget, obviously, but it would take up all the millage rate.
That's right.
It's true.
That's kind of hard for people to wrap their heads around, but
It is.
And
To
that's
me-
what this is. This is, the increase would be a public safety increase.
I talked about that in MSTU when I first got elected. There's an appealing side of it. The hard sell part about it is now you could have an MSBU or an ad valorem that goes to 10 mils and an MSTU that goes to 10 mils. So now you could be at 20 instead of a 10 mil cap. And that's the hard sell.
That's the hard sell. That's
Yeah.
right.
And that could happen with the right people.
That's the dangerous side.
If we open
Sheriff-
that door, that could happen.
That's
sheriff wouldn't want it either, because
Yeah.
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 they'd have to
Well,
defend that
and
millage
right
rate.
now, that's the way it's working anyway.
Right.
I got one more thing. The MSBU fire assessment for 1819. I've got our fire call count, and I don't know if everybody remembers last year we talked about how we come up with our rates and everything, and I've reached out to the property appraiser to get the next year numbers for what our household count is and what our commercial square footage and our land, just to see what the new numbers are. So at our July meeting, I should have the information about what those proposed rates were going to be.
So we're looking at a marginal increase.
I don't know that yet. I do know that we have had some commercial development, and that's good for the residential people. I haven't looked at the calls because it's actually based on the percentage of usage. We put the cost who's using it most, and so I haven't had a chance to look at that. So I think it's a little too early to say there's going to be an increase. We did talk last year about a CPI increase in that, but we haven't got those numbers calculated yet. Until I get with property appraiser, get the new information. So we can talk about that at the July meeting, hopefully.
Yep.
That's all I have.
If I've said it once, I've said it 1,000 times. I don't say people don't mind paying taxes. They don't mind it as much as long as they know the money's being spent wisely. I think that's the biggest thing for taxpayers. You're not wasting my money.
Well, I guarantee you this, we're not wasting money, and we're clear and we're transparent, and,
We're not flying down to Barbados or...
yeah, we're not flying to
County
Barbados
vehicles.
or Costa Rica or any of that stuff, so.
Yeah. We're not living in luxury, I mean, we don't have luxury offices, right? You can
No.
lay down and know that feet touching us.
Trust me, we're not in a lap of luxury, so, but no, I think we run a good, well-run, government, and, got great employees, and they do a good job day to day. You notice we're not busting budgets anywhere. We're holding the line on budgets, and every year we come in a little under that. And, we've serviced well
So Greg gets a hold of us at the end.
until Greg gets hold of us at the end of the year. But, we service, I mean, you look at the library and look at the things that Miss Robin is doing down there. She had 80 people at the Lego Club, and that's 85, and so I mean we're clicking along pretty good.
Which is an old grocery store, by the way, the library. So we're, when you can go out and spend a ton of money on, we got an
That's
old
right.
grocery store for a library.
How are you able to plug, let's just say the bike trail, the expense of the bike trail? How did you just plug that into the numbers?
That's going to hit our road and bridge fund, which is funded through our gas taxes.
Okay.
That way, the purpose of that is one, it's on the FDOT right away. Secondly, if there's dollars in the future that come up, more than likely they'll be funded through FDOT, and it'll fit right into the.
That's the same thing with the Moline Airport, that comes through the same.
That's a little bit different deal. That we pay that out of the airport, has its own fund, and we get reimbursed from Tarpine each year on the cost of doing all that.
And remember how much money we save by not having to pay to relocate that sewer for the 4-lane and 2. Look at the good things.
12 million?
That's the good news.
We would have had to pay that, and
That's big time
possibly
good
through
news.
property taxes.
That's something that the general public doesn't understand how big a deal that was.
And, DOT
Millions
is
and millions
building
and
parking
millions of
for us
dollars.
downtown Crawford, no charge.
Yeah.
The other thing is
I believe when I see
the
it.
oil
You said one
spill.
time that it wouldn't happen in your lifetime. I remember you said that.
Huh?
The oil spill, how much that benefited us.
Yeah.
I was down at Welcome Center when the guys from the state was talking about damages to money that people were going to get, and I probably shouldn't go into that.
But anyway, we're still continuing to sewer in Wakulla and Magnolia Gardens. We'll as well as the Medart bypass is going in. Those projects will continue into next year. So we'll also be paving behind all of those, even though we're running a little behind. That wasn't due to our contractors. That's primarily due to the utility guys ahead of us that had not moved their utilities. Those are getting moved out of the way, and as they do, we're moving forward. So, but that's in the budget for next year to just continue paving right behind our sewer system in Wakulla and Magnolia Gardens.
Sheriff, that's the Medart sewer bypass, not a road. We're not going to bypass Medart.
DEP committed again today of continuing our sewer expansion
Yep.
as well, and we're in a group, there was probably, I don't know, 10 North Florida rural counties there, and we're the only county that's receiving that, so that's a big deal.
That's a big deal for
Yeah.
Cherie, and we all worked together, and she was the driver behind all that, so.
On the negative side of that's the BMAP, though.
Oh, yeah.
But, no, that's,
Yeah, but it's,
I'm told, back on the sheriff for a second, I mean, we really got to reach out and help him. I'm told that
Yes.
there's more school resource
expecting a
officers
challenge
than there
to it.
are deputies on the road at any one time.
that's probably
That's
true.
correct.
That's pathetic, that our society has come to that, number one, that we got to put that many SROs in schools, which I think we need, but that there are fewer deputies on the road than there are in schools. That's sad, state of affairs. But this will help him if we put this other shift on, so we have
Yeah,
more deputies on.
and as he mentioned, what he wants to be able to do is divide 319 south, be the dividing line to where, you know, he has a deputy that'll serve Shell Point, Live Oak Island, all those, St. Mark's, all those areas, and then stop chopping Panacea that way, versus now he has one that does that. That way he can break it up into two, to help out, help our citizens.
Well, I mean, if you can imagine being a law enforcement officer that's 2 o'clock in the morning, he's taking a call, and his backup is on the other side of the county trying to get to him, you know, that's scary. We're laying in bed safe and sound, and you know, and that scares me, and we got to help him, so however we do that. Anyway.
You know, I think it's probably important to note, too, that our superintendent, our school board, and the sheriff worked out that school resource officer issue without us being really, you know, drug into that. There are counties that are fighting right now. It's becoming a dogfight over who's going to pay for that, where the money's going to come from, and
Well, good news is the state intervened there,
yeah,
and they were also, the key was they stayed inside that funding.
right. But there are some counties that apparently that wasn't enough, so there's a fight that is underway.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It is, every year it's a food fight.
yeah.
Just a little bit off the subject, state government, it's all funded by PST and sales tax, is that correct?
PST,
I mean,
state government,
It's off sales tax.
sales tax,
sales tax.
and see, they do have a state communications tax, so.
yes.
But that is dropping as well, so.
State,
And a
gas
fuel
tax.
tax as well, right?
And fuel taxes for FDOT, yeah.
As opposed to a state income tax.
Right.
So my point is that some states choose to use an income tax to fund their government. Ours uses sales tax.
It's much better on the sales tax side.
Well, we have a lot of tourists that come here
Yeah.
that help pay that.
I used to pay my share in state income taxes.
Florida's the only place to go.
Yeah.
But there's different ways to fund the government besides what everybody else is doing.
But, no, we, like I say, we really, that's the, you know, when we got one of the biggest problems we have is, you know, deciding whether or not we put on another shift. Those are good problems to have, you know, if you really look at it. So we're fortunate.
Getting rid of CST,
Agricultural guys.
That's all we got.
switching it over to the PST.
Further discussion? Citizens, staff, anyone else like to speak or ask questions?
We might have to do something about PST.
Mike?
Get rid of it.
You good? Okay. Huh?
Very good.
Well, I just wanted to comment, it's interesting that growth doesn't seem to pay for itself, because we're having to add services, cost for services, and growth only paid for 260,000 of it. We had to add considerably more than that. That's the cost of community service. Cost of community service, basically, just building more houses won't get us out of debt. It's only building those businesses that get us out of debt, so.
And then again, but at some point, you know, you don't, every time somebody moves in, you can't add 1/1000th of a deputy either. At some point, it reaches a tipping point, and this happened to be that year.
But we're only handling the sheriff now, but we'll have other things that we provide that are going to reach that same tipping point as it comes along.
Well, I think this year is as we talked about, we got really hit hard at the end of last year with some unexpected things. If it hadn't been for that, we wouldn't be having, you know what I mean, we wouldn't be having these conversations. So, but, you know, the good news is we recognized it, put the brakes on, and we feel like we can take a breath this year and move forward next year.
Let me go back to one more thing on Chuck's point. That was interesting. like I said earlier, we theoretically can't go to the rollback rate every year because you can't provide the exact same thing at the exact same cost you did. If we didn't do a rollback, if it increased by, say, just CPI every year, the amount of money collected, then this bump probably wouldn't need to be done at one time. You see what I'm saying?
Right.
We've been going to the rollback rate.
Same way we did fire and MSBU, we should have been doing it all along, and then we had to do it all in 1 year, you had to eat it all.
I'm not saying growth would cover it then, but that would make a huge
It
difference.
would make a huge
If
difference.
it
But
went up.
the numbers are that growth doesn't pay for itself. Businesses pay for their.
If you assume that things cost the same from year to year to year, you're exactly right. But we all know they don't. So,
We need to encourage business. I'm fine
you know
with
what I'm
that.
saying?
Well, if you, that's what makes you the income.
But you gotta have the houses to have the business. Those
All that comes
houses
together.
begets commercial.
Yes.
Not commercial begets houses.
You got-
Any idea what the CPI increase was this year or this?
I don't think they've calculated it, have they, Nat?
What was it
not
last, what was it last
Yeah,
year?
it's based on.
Is that, you haven't got any CPI calculations yet?
They calculate CPI every
Okay,
month.
what was it last year then?
Depends on what month.
What was it last year for the fiscal year? How much did the MSBU for fire go up? Didn't that go up by CPI?
No, not last year. We did the adjustment from $80 per residential to 99.
See where
So,
I'm going here? I'm just curious
Yes,
what
and-
the CPI was.
and it's usually somewhere between 2.5% and 3%, and we'll have that information at the next meeting, what the rate will be with the CPI included, and I'll let you know what the
different
percent.
CPI, so we
Yeah,
got-
there's a bazillion different
Yeah,
price
and we got-
indexes.
We use 1 month for ESG's contract increase, we use another month for the.
I'm just
fire-
curious as to what, by not going to the rollback rate, that's a tax increase. What was the actual CPI over a year period, how close those numbers actually are? It's probably not because we're adding shifts, but
The CPI has been running about an average about I would say
2.5 to 3.
2.5% is what I'd use.
and what was the ad valorem collected last year?
What was your total ad valorem?
Just roughly.
8.5, $8.6 million.
And 2.5? $215,000 would be taken up in CPI. Which, and we're going up 400.
Here's what Bureau of Labor Statistics says. In May, consumer price index for all urban consumers increased 0.2%, seasonally adjusted, rising 2.8% over the last 12 months.
So if we,
So from May to May, it was 2.8.
It's just a larger discussion, but if we went rollback rate plus CPI every year, it would be easy to keep the millage rate the same.
One thing, y'all were talking about the sheriff's office, and I have sheriff's budget requests here. In 17-18, when he took office, he reduced 5 staff positions. So now, reducing that 5 and bringing back on the new officers, he's asking to add 11 additional personnel. But if you look at where they were in 12-13, they're still down 14 employees from their 12-13 level to 17-18.
And that includes the school resource officers?
I'm assuming, yes, 6 school resource officers funded by the school board is included in that 11.
So that's not even
And then the
our
5
cost.
law enforcement officers. So I can tell you, he reduced his community and youth relations sergeant and community and youth relations criminal analyst. These are the changes that he made when he took over. Fire range lieutenant, public information officer, and chief technology officer.
He made some changes.
That's when he took office. Those are the operational changes he made.
School resource officers get funded completely by the school board?
Yes,
No. Do they?
yes,
Totally?
yes.
Wow, that's new.
A lot of counties have 50/50. The board picks up half of it.
We picked up half of the ones from last year, previous.
Mm-mm.
We'll agree
We
with
sent the
you.
school board $500,000 a year.
Unless they're buried in his regular law enforcement.
Right, but that's been forever.
Yes.
Forever.
You're talking about like racetrack money and,
Yes.
yeah.
But there was one time when we paid part of the school resource, or the school board didn't pay it all. Pretty sure, maybe they did, I'm wrong.
I don't recall a separate line item for that.
They are, that's great.
Further discussion? Anyone?
I got it figured out before I got here.
How many citizens do we have here? Do we have any citizens?
Everybody's citizens, I think.
They're all citizens.
Our one citizen.
How many, is there anybody here who is not connected to the county?
Of course not.
No, you are connected to county, ma'am. Very much connected. No.
Do you have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All right, we'll stand adjourned. Thank you.